It's Sunday, February 15th. This morning, I'm going to read to you one of my favorite stories of all time that I think I have a bit of a different perspective on now than I originally read it. And it's called The Parable of Two Programmers. And I don't remember which BBBS it was originally posted to, but it is an age-old story that now is most easy to find on personal blogs of retired computer programmers or computer science university websites. Originally attributed to Neil W. Rickert, it is a story that was as relevant when I first read it probably 25 years ago as it was when it was written probably 20 years before that. Once upon a time, unbeknownst to each other, the Automated Accounting Applications Association and the Consolidated Computerized Capital Corporation decided that they needed the identical program to perform a certain service. Automated hired a programmer analyst, Alan, to solve their problem. Meanwhile, Consolidated decided to ask a newly hired entry-level programmer, Charles, to tackle the job, to see if he was as good as he pretended. Alan, having had experience in difficult programming projects, decided to use the PQR structured design methodology. With this in mind, he asked his department manager to assign another 3 programmers as a programming team. Then the team went to work, churning out preliminary reports and problem analyses. Back at Consolidated, Charles spent his time thinking about the problem. His fellow employees noticed that Charles often sat with his feet on the desk, drinking coffee. He was occasionally seen at his computer terminal, but his office mate could tell from the rhythmic striking of keys that he was actually playing Space Invaders. By now, the team at Automated was starting to write code. The programmers were spending about half of their time writing and compiling code, and the rest of their time in conference, discussing the interfaces between the various modules. His office mate noticed that Charles had finally given up on Space Invaders. Instead, he now divided his time between drinking coffee with his feet on the table and scribbling on little scraps of paper. His scribbling didn't seem to be tic-tac-toe, but it didn't exactly make much sense either. 2 months have gone by. The team at Automated finally releases an implementation timetable. In another 2 months, they will have a test version of the program. Then a 2-month period of testing and enhancing should yield a completed version. The manager of Charles has by now become tired of seeing him goof off. He decides to confront him. But as he walks into Charles's office, he is surprised to see Charles busy entering code at his terminal. He decides to postpone the confrontation, so makes some small talk and then leaves. However, he begins to keep a closer watch on Charles so that when the opportunity presents itself, he can confront him. Not looking forward to an unpleasant conversation, he is pleased to notice that Charles seems to be busy most of the time. He's even been seen to delay his lunch and to stay after work 2 to 3 days a week. At the end of 3 months, Charles announces that he has completed the project. He submits a 500-line program. The program appears to be clearly written, and when tested, it does everything required in the specifications. In fact, it even has a few additional convenience features, which might significantly improve the usability of the program. The program is put into a test, and except for one quickly corrected oversight, performs well. The team at Automated has by now completed 2 of the 4 major modules required for their program. These modules are now undergoing testing, while the other modules are completed. After another 3 weeks, Alan announces that the preliminary version is ready 1 week ahead of schedule. He supplies a list of the deficiencies that he expects to correct. The program is placed under test. The users find a number of bugs and deficiencies, other than those predicted and listed. As Alan explains, this is no surprise. After all, this is a preliminary version in which bugs are expected. After about 2 more months, the team has completed its production version of the program. It contains about 2,500 lines of code. When tested, it seems to satisfy most of the original specifications. It has omitted one or two features and is very fussy about the format of the input data. However, the company decides to install the program. They can always train their data entry staff to enter data in the strict format required. The program is handed over to some maintenance programmers to eventually incorporate the missing features. The sequel. At first, Charles's supervisor was impressed, but as he read through the source code, he realized the project was really much simpler than he had originally thought. It seemed apparent that this was not much of a challenge, even for a beginning programmer. Charles did produce about 5 lines of code per day. That's perhaps a little above average. However, considering the simplicity of this program, it was nothing exceptional. Also, his supervisor remembered his 2 months of goofing off. At his next salary review, Charles was given a raise, which was about half the inflation over the time period. He was not given a promotion. After about a year, he became discouraged and left Consolidated. At Automated, Alan was complimented for completing his project on schedule. His supervisor looked over the program, and within a few minutes of thumbing through, he saw that company standards about structured programming were being observed. He quickly gave up attempting to read the program, however. It seemed quite incomprehensible. He realized by now that the project was really much more complex than he had originally assumed, and he congratulated Alan again on his achievement. The team had produced over 3 lines of code per programmer per day. This was about average, but considering the complexity of the problem, could be considered to be exceptional. Alan was given a hefty pay raise and promoted to systems analyst as a reward for his achievement. So when I first read this story, I was a computer science undergraduate at the University of Minnesota, circa late 2000s, somewhere between 2006 and 2010. And it resonated. I think at that time, as a 19 to 20-year-old man, I was more concerned about developing my own skills and making a name for myself, and finally realizing all of this education and potential that had been put into me my whole upbringing. And so when I read this, read this, I think Charles was very easy to see as the protagonist, as the very relatable person, because efficiency is a good thing. To be thoughtful about something and to be efficient in carrying it out is a virtue. And I think there's absolutely still truth to that. And what I've learned in 15 plus years in software consulting, doing both implementation consulting, working with organizations to adopt new software, and more significantly for me into this story, I've done a lot of programming. I have kind of, in a lot of that time, been in a place where I'm the most technical or the only programmer on a team of non-programmers, people who are better at relationship building or management and oversight. I have been the tech brain in a lot of those places and spaces. And that's how I've been promoted. That's the reason why I've done, I guess, well in a professional and promotion sense, is because when big problems have come up that need technical solutions and need them banged out elegantly and simply, I've been able to do that several times. But this is perhaps the most important cautionary tale that I would have any young, especially programmer or aspiring computer scientist, because I think programmer is a term that may not really mean the same thing in 5 years than it does now, but I think the root of this story definitely will. The business world, especially the corporate world, is going to operate a lot more like Alan, and it will continue to reward a thought process that is more like Alan's. And if we expect that the world is a just place, if you expect the meritocracy illusion that is presented at most corporations, and expect that if you do things intelligently and you do good work and you work really hard, you're going to get rewarded for it, that's not the case. The corporate world rewards predictability, it rewards setting realistic or even low expectations and then exceeding them far more than it does actual brilliance. Now, that's not to say that you should just be Alan, because I think that one of the things that's helped me after I did get promoted, and I have kind of been in a more comfortable or senior position, is making sure that I understand both points of view. Because a lot of the time, it is more important to have a timetable that can be built around something that can be communicated externally. It's important to have some redundancy within a team. Um, and so there is some merit, I think, to that more corporate, organized, structured side of things when it comes to developing software or implementing it or troubleshooting it. Really, there's so many tasks around software, and I think always will be, that there, you know, is some merit to understanding that approach and looking into the benefits. But there's always going to be a need for that Charles energy, taking a look at things that are perhaps complex on the outside, and spending some time processing and simplifying before finally creating something that is elegant. I think when I look at doing Charles like labor now, it's more that I pay attention to recognizing those that are still in that mindset, that are still younger, that are still able to really create amazing things on amazing timetables out of passion. And I think as a senior person in the corporate world, it's important to make sure that that is recognized more than anything else. It's important to internalize this story and understand that in order to create important things, whether it is for a corporation or whether you're creating software projects to protect your community as a volunteer network, um, making sure that you keep a diverse set of perspectives, and especially when it comes to different kind of takes or environments on programming, is still and will continue to be relevant. I imagine that this is a story that will still live on university websites in 20 years and will still be relevant, even as we have to look at it through getting an AI to crank out lines of code versus having it architecture code. Who knows what it's really going to look like, but I think that the human heart of this story will absolutely still ring true.